I'm here today with Tracie Morrison. Tracie's the author of a new book titled Prayer, Talk, Listen, Obey, Starting and Strengthening Conversations with God. Tracie earned her BA in English from Rutgers University and her MA in counseling from Montclair State University. Tracie's currently in her first year as a high school vice principal. She also has been a school counselor at Montclair Public Schools since 2006. Her inaugural stage play, The Prayer Dancer, was performed at the George Street Playhouse in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 2004 and was later published in 2015. For almost 20 years, Tracie has provoked others to build their own capacity through her teaching, counseling, and writing. Considered a church baby, Tracie has served on prayer ministry and women's ministry teams, taught women's Bible study, facilitated workshops on various topics, initiated a monthly prayer calendar, and authored her church's annual Lenten devotional. So Tracie, you've done a lot, and it's so wonderful to see that you've gotten a new book out in the world. So congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm like, it's been a journey. And I will say, look, so I'll hold it up just so that, it's here.
Yes, it's real.
Yeah, it's real. And took some time, but, I'm grateful for the journey. And I think that, to any writer out there or aspiring writer, enjoy the journey. I think that so much of the world, wants to look at, the finished product and did you get to the end? And sometimes when you get to the end, you're just like, whew, but enjoy the journey. This has been a process. You mentioned, in the introduction about the prayer calendar. And so one of the ministers who I, shout out in the book, Reverend Deborah Richardson, asked our former pastor, Reverend William Watley, if we could have a prayer ministry. And he, said yes. And so we would have prayer service, on Tuesday evenings. And, during those services, I kind of would just look around the room, or whenever we would ask someone to pray, they would get nervous and no. And I, kind of thought about that, like, why are you nervous? We're in church, like, it's prayer, just talk to God, no big deal. And just kind of really thought about, and, the conversations that I've had with friends, or the conversations that I may have even had with some of my church members. And, where they would talk about like, I don't really know how to pray, or I can't pray as good as the preacher, or I can't pray as good as this one. And I'm like, pray as good. What does that mean? Really helps to engage people in the idea of prayer and what that actually means. And so the calendar actually helped me to be able to draw on the book.
That's really good. Isn't it nice how, different parts of our lives sometimes, can synchronize like that to support each other?
Absolutely. So when we talk about things together, I opened the book talking about, my final paper that I wrote for my Black religion class at Rutgers, and that was in 1998. And to think that that's where sort of the little hyphen in prayer came from, because in the paper I talk about, prayer as, praying, but also the prayer, you as the person who is praying. And so when I thought about, how do we fix the title for the book, I'm like, oh, hey, I already had that, so who knew in 1998, right, that, it would become the title, for my book, or who knew, that I would even have a book. I've always wanted to write. So that's the cool thing. I sat and wrote stories as a kid, on Saturday morning. So I've always wanted to be a writer. So to have an actual book is, a dream come true. And, certainly I'm grateful, part of God's plan.
Well, it's nice that you made it official, so to speak, even though, as you said, that's not as important as the journey, and all the work that it takes before the actual book appears.
Yes, for sure. And the fact that sometimes, depending on the book that you're writing, you have to live it.
Yes.
You're living it first, and the entire experience. And so when we talk about prayer, there's been a lot of it, lots of conversations with God, lots of questions, lots of reflecting. And, sort of as I thought about the book, a lot of people were like, well, is this like a book, if you will. And I'm like, well, no, the teacher side of me thought about, how do we, help people, or design lessons, if you will, for our students to learn. And if we're talking about, engaging in prayer, how do we do that? And so the counselor part of me, the teacher part of me thought about, exercises and questions that would really help people to engage with God, to have these authentic conversations. I'm not going to, the book doesn't tell you how to pray my way. It simply asks you some questions to really think about and think about your relationship with God, because that's what prayer is. It's relationship. So where is that relationship? Where do you want that relationship to go? And you engaging in conversation will drive that.
Well, I think that's wonderful. It makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, because everyone's different, and different styles and different tendencies and different ways that we're comfortable. And, I like the fact that you don't prescribe a right way versus a wrong way to pray.
And I don't think that there is, Brian, he uniquely created us, right? So if he talks about, I created you, I formed you, in your mother's womb, or you're being molded on the potter's wheel, that means that we're all different fingerprints, all different, that means that our voice is unique. And in our voice being unique, he's looking to hear Tracie. He's looking to hear Brian. And if you sound like me, well, that's not Brian, right? And your situation, circumstances, the things that you're going through, are unique to you. And he wants to talk to you about what you're going through, and while, yes, I can intercede and you can say, Tracie, pray for me, I can do that in agreement with you. But he's like, well, where's Brian on the matter, right? So it's our ability to kind of share our story. He knows it, but how do we develop that relationship with him and just kind of tell him, God, here's where I'm at today,
So, there's a lot of books on prayer, and, we just talked about uniqueness. I mean, tell us how this book is unique and why you're the right person to write it.
Sure. I think that, one of the things that I, shout out to, my publisher, Mind Matters Publishing, to Renita and Dietrich, in this journey, when we did our consultation, they gave me homework and basically said, you need to understand the market you're coming into. And I think a great piece of advice that they gave me that I'll share with, those that are watching, they said, read the reviews of the genre you're coming into. What are people saying? Good, bad, and indifferent. And for me, as I read the reviews, I pulled out the pieces that I felt, how does prayer, relate to these comments? And so, people were talking about wanting something authentic, wanting something that they can use right away, wanting something that wasn't prescribed, wanting something that really did help them in the immediate engage in prayer. And so I think that what was important to me was to make sure that as I shared my prayer journey, that I thought about the ways in which and the experiences that I had with God, the questions that my friends were asking about prayer, that this is not set aside for the religious. This is not set aside just for persons who, have the collar around their neck or, who, know God. Prayer is for everyone. And I'm an everyday girl with everyday issues, and here's how my journey, through prayer went. And here are some ways that you can engage. And so the teacher side of me thought about different exercises. The counselor side of me thought about reflective questions. And then I pulled from the prayer calendars, which each month there was a different theme. And so, like, one of the prayer calendars was him and I, my grandmother and, all of those, my aunts and all of them, they sang the hymns of the church. And as a kid, it just seems like, why is this song taking so long? I'm like, oh, geez. And then, they're singing all 4 verses, like, good grief, when is it gonna end? As an adult, looking back at those hymns, great is thy faithfulness, and, I surrender all, and all of those, sort of blessed assurance, nothing but the blood. You come to understand as you go through life experiences what those songs, those prayers mean for you. And so I put that, sort of some of the hymns that, minister to me now, that I laughed at or wanted to end, when I was a kid. Those are a part of, the process, thinking about how hymns are prayers, looking at scripture and how you can, I don't have the words today, God, but you know what? Your word won't return void. So I'm just going to give you back your word today, right? You promised good things to me. You said that you had a plan for me. And so I'm going to trust that today's plan is good, and I pray that you cover me and keep me, right? So that as we're going throughout the day, it's not deep, it's not hard, but it's really just kind of talking to God from where you are. So, out of my relationship, out of my experience, I thought that it was necessary as a layperson, if you will, as an educator, as a counselor, to be able to kind of have a conversation with others through the book about prayer.
Cool. So how would you suggest people read the book? I mean, is it kind of a beginning to end sequentially thing, or is it more like a devotional where it's little bite-sized pieces, or how's it structured?
Yeah, so hopefully I can hold it up in this. Can we see? I'm not really sure. Can you see?
A little bit.
Okay, kind of, sort of, yeah.
A little bit.
So I kind of ask persons to start with the prologue, which gives you the introduction of the paper that I wrote back in 1998, so that there's some connection. I give you an introduction, and in the invitation, I sneak in the prayer of salvation, because, of course, our purpose is to draw others to Christ. And so I sneak it in there in the invitation. And then invitation, I encourage people to read through the table of contents. There are 5 sections. Lord, where do I begin? Lord, I'm ready to pray. Lord, this is hard. Lord, I need your help. Lord, hear my prayers. And so, at the point where, you finished reading, like the first 9 pages, I just simply say, pray. Ask the Lord, where is it that I need to be in this book for today, or for this week? And then you find that space and then go from there, right? So it's really meant to be, as I'm calling it, I think, a prayer companion. I think, a devotional, sometimes you may pick it up, put it down, but the goal is that, if you're starting in prayer, that, you would pick up the book, and some people, just like they pick up the Bible, there are some people, when you just start that journey of reading scripture, you just kind of open it and like, I'm going to start here. And wherever you land, you're like, Lord, give me wisdom and direction, right? And so, I encourage you, if you want to do the same with the book, open it. And wherever you land, you know what I mean? Let that be the place that ministers to you at that point.
Cool. So as you well know, a lot of the audience for Publishing in Color and Writing for Your Life are really early stage writers.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how you went about finding the publisher for this?
Sure. So I actually attended a author, the virtual space has been amazing, right? Because in some ways it's brought us closer to things that we may have never, known about. I found you, right? And so there was an NAACP author expo, women's expo. And I logged on and listened to other women who, whose books were published, and they were talking about their journey. And I kind of in the chat asked like 50 million questions about, how much, did it cost? How much was, how much of an investment, is this process? How did you go about finding, your publisher? And there was one author, Dr. Sunrise Smith, who her personality was just so engaging, and she was so excited, and she talked about it being really important for her to have, a Black publishing company. And so she did her research, and so I reached out to her on LinkedIn. Like, I just kind of typed her name in LinkedIn, and I said, hi, I was in the audience, for that author expo, and you were just so excited about your publisher. I wanted to, check them out. And she gave me their name. She was like, tell them that I sent you, you may even get a discount. And then I reached out to Mind Matters Publishing. They have a consultation. So before, you even start anything, There is a consultation. They ask you lots of questions. They tell you up front, you may or may not be a New York Times bestseller. You know what I mean? So if that's your intention, let's kind of slow down. This is really about, again, the journey. So yes, there's a business side to it, but we want to make sure that you understand what the journey actually is. And so they gave me the homework of checking out, the market, understanding what genre the book was going to be in, what price point. So all of those things, so it became an educational space for me. I was given homework to do, after we met for the consultation, and then really prayed like, okay, God, are we going to really take this journey, and what does this mean? Because you mentioned the other book, Prayer, the Prayer Dancer, and that was an interesting space. So I will say doing your research is really important, because the publisher that actually published that book is no longer operating.
Wow.
And I later found out that there were several persons who lost their money when that company folded. Thankfully, I actually received all of my rights and everything back, because the book wasn't selling, which, I didn't even know that was a thing, that, they would send your rights back if your book wasn't selling. So that was sort of a mind blow. I will say there are still those books in the garage. And there was a space where I felt like, God, I don't want to do this again, because, it was kind of embarrassing. It was kind of hurtful. It was money lost. Like, I don't know that I want to do this again. Why would I do this again? But the reality is, if you have an assignment and this is a part of your destiny, this is a part of God's plan for your life, then regardless of whether you have an audience of 1, an audience of 20, you make the New York Times bestseller, be obedient to what he's called you to do and let him lead the way. I literally was like, okay, God, if I'm going to do this, my portion is to write the book. The rest is up to you. And so, here we are. I found you, and, I found Mind Matters, and, and day by day, I'm just posting it on social media, and, and hopefully, people are being blessed by it.
Very cool. Very cool. So I know, this is just a brand new book, so I mean, it's a little bit early to talk about future books, but, is there anything that you've got in mind that you
that is hilarious. You know what, Brian, literally, I think I'm still taking a breath from this one.
That's
honestly,
fine. That's fine. I don't mean to be
still
pushy, but I just have to ask folks,
But I think that, one of the things that I thought about, I was talking to one of my my prayer partners and friends in women's ministry, and we were laughing one day about the fact that I've had to live out trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not to thine own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. That I've had to live that out in chunks, like in very small spaces. That first it was trust. Then it was trust in the Lord. Then it was, and so I talked about how, maybe, if there was another book, that I would think about the scriptures that I've had to kind of live out, and piece by piece, and what it means that, no, I have not read the Bible in 1 year. No, I do not know all of the scriptures, but for the ones that, I do know, and the ones that he makes me live over and over again, and talking about that process. And so, we were just laughing, and she was like, that's a book. And I'm like, ha ha. So, I don't know. I think I leave it in God's hands. Am I open to writing another one? Absolutely. But I am kind of, on the other side, just like I wrote The Prayer Dancer, I am in the process of working on another play. So we'll see the direction.
Good for you.
Yeah. So
we'll take a break from more books for the time being.
Yeah, so we'll take a break from books so that I can play on the theater side. So the creative side of me, So the new one is called Preach Preacher, and it's looking at the interview process. The pastor of the church has died, and it thinks about the interview process for finding a new one. And so that should, so that's going to be fun. And hopefully we'll be having a reading, a stage reading of that soon. So I'll keep you posted.
Absolutely.
But so we're going to have fun with that.
Good. Well, again, the title of the book is Prayer, Talk, Listen, Obey, Starting and Strengthening Conversations with God. And Tracie, congratulations, on
Thank
making
you
this
so
happen,
much.
getting the book out. It's available at Barnes and Noble, I saw,
It's
Amazon,
available on, yep,
other
absolutely. Books a
locations.
Million. It's out there. And, please, I encourage you, please leave, feedback, whether it's on social media or on Amazon or on, Barnes and Noble. Reviews are welcome, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm an educator, so we are always learning, we are always stretching, we are always growing. So I appreciate your feedback. And my hope is, and my sincere hope, while I'd love to sell, a million books, I would love for a million people to come to know God for themselves and to just kind of have some really great conversations with him so that he can take you to the places that you never even dreamed of. May he blow your mind, in this season. That's my prayer. Yep.
Yay, yay. Well, thank you for the prayer. And thank you
Absolutely.
so much for joining us and sharing about your book. I really appreciate it, Tracie.
Thank you, Brian.